All right, I'm going to hit play now. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording, and today we're going to look at the Squarp Hermod Plus. It's the updated version of the Hermod, which is their modular brain, aka sequencer, CV recorder, MIDI controller, CV to MIDI converter. It does a lot, but you can think of it as a very, very capable sequencer with both powerful deterministic controls as well as powerful algorithmic controls. I have a very close relationship, precious relationship with the original Hermod. It was my first big boy sequencer for Eurorack, and I think it was responsible for me developing a lot of the sound that people associate with my Eurorack compositions, which is songs, more song-oriented sections, and we'll get to why later. But it has to do with the ability to write patterns and sequences and switch between them like you do with songs. The Hermod Plus has 8 CV gate tracks, 8 MIDI tracks, CV inputs for recording, editing, and looping voltage and gate stuff. You can record MIDI and CV up to 16 bars per pattern. There's those nice pads for editing. You can program and record automated modulations for each track, and you can add up to 8 real-time dynamic effects per channel to create performance variations that are non-destructive. There's a 4-slot mod matrix for that can be attenuverted and offset. There's a song mode, synchronized project swap, and much more. Check the chapter markers if you want to skip around, but we'll be starting off with a blank project, and I'll walk you through pretty much everything I think that is important to know about the Hermod Plus. Thanks to Squarp for sponsoring this video. Let's get started. Let's start a new project, and I will explain clocking real quick. The Hermod Plus has a MIDI out and a clock out. The MIDI out can, of course, send all kinds of MIDI information, including clock. And the clock out will send clock of a variety of PPQNs. Goes up to 24 PPQN. I'm using the MIDI out to feed the 1010 blue box, which means when I hit play on the Hermod, the two are synced. The blue box is feeding this MIDI adapter from ALM, which is keeping PAMs in sync. So we got a tight loop here. Clock settings are adjusted and saved in the settings, and you want to make sure that you save those settings when you go in there. So we'll go to track settings, and then we'll have our settings for sync in and out. So we could go into sync out, and we can adjust our settings here. You can see all the different settings that we have. Clock transport for all the inputs and outputs. Down here, we're going to find analog clock out settings, and you'll see that we are at 24 PPQN, which is the good clock, the super high clock that MIDI loves, that PAM loves. It's the MIDI clock signal. Once you've changed your settings, you need to go all the way to the right in settings and hit save. You got to make sure you do that. I forgot to do that, and it tripped me up. Let's go ahead and make a new project. We'll hit sequence, press the encoder, and go to project save load. Copy sequence, clear sequence. We'll go to project save load and go to new. Yes, I am sure. Now you might want to set your tempo, which you do by holding the play button. Let's go ahead and set something kind of nice, easy, middle of the road, like 112. Before I get started, I want to make sure that my tracks are going to quantize my MIDI input, and I'll show you what that means. Track 1 here is our bass track. And if I hit play and record some notes, you're going to hear that those are a little sloppy because I am not really the best player. They need to be quantized, which is a very common thing in electronic music, and it means that the notes are going to adhere to a grid. You don't have to with the Hermod Plus, which is great, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I will. I'm going to hold down the track button, and I'm going to get into the track settings. And I go into player, and here I can set my quantize. I'm going to set it to 1/16 notes, but we can have all kinds of options here. We can also transpose and change sustain and all that kind of stuff. So I can go to each track and apply whatever quantized value I want per track, which is pretty damn cool. We're going to set 16 for all of them. Now, this is actually adhering to the grid. You can hear that my playing was very sloppy, and now it's adhered to the grid. That's good. Hermod works in a series of 16 steps. You can see these right here. I can actually just put down steps via these pads, and I can actually edit them too. So I can edit the note data for each one. I can edit the length for each one. And I can edit the velocity for each one. Here's length. Everything is editable via this interface, which is actually a pretty ingenious way of doing it. These pads are a really nice addition to Hermod Plus. What if I wanted more than one bar? Well, I can do that very easily. By holding down Y, I can change this to up to 256 steps or 8 bars at a regular rate. Let's go for a nice 4-bar loop. One of the nice things about the Hermod Plus is that in the previous Hermod, if I remember correctly, when you change the number of bars, it weren't guaranteed that you would actually end up in the right phrase position, meaning you could just be randomly within that 4-bar loop. But the Hermod Plus seems to have that taken care of, which is really, really fantastic. I have a KeyStep 37 hooked up. Let's hit record and record some notes. You can see I'm currently viewing one page of the 4 we have, but I can hit Y and move between them, or X and move back. I can also zoom by holding down X and changing the knob, which is really, really useful. This is how you can edit steps once you've recorded. You are wondering what is doing the voices here. Osiris up there from Modbab is the bass. The plucked string sound is the qubit surface right there. The lead sound is from the noise engineering Vert Interlegio, and the arpity sound, the little arp plink, is from the Make Noise XPO. The drums are from the Bitbox Micro. They're samples, and they're being sequenced by the Acid Rain Constellation. So I've recorded a sequence now. What if I wanted to record another sequence? Well, if I go to the sequence page, these pads all represent a sequence. If I click this one, I now have a blank sequence. And I can switch back and forth between them, just like Ableton or Clip Launcher. If I wanted to, I could hit this button and go into these settings, copy the sequence, go to this other one, click the button again, and paste the sequence. But there's an easier way to do that. While things are running, I can pick a sequence I want to copy and then click a blank empty sequence, and then it will copy it to there on the fly. Pretty cool. You can also mute and unmute tracks over here. So between tracks muting and sequence changing, it really does feel like I'm working with like Ableton session mode, which is fantastic. Let's make a few more sequences and I'll show you song mode. Okay, so song mode. Everybody loves a song mode. Let's do song mode. If I hold down X and press one of the pads that I've recorded stuff onto, I start adding those in a chain in the sequence, and I can just keep adding them if I want to. When I hit play, it's now going to switch between them, but you may have to change your launch settings. Right now we're at 1 bar for sync, but it's not working quite like how I would expect. So let's change this over to modulo. And now it should play through the sequence completely. Let all those different length patterns play, and then it will switch over. There we go. And that is the basics of recording and sequencing and song mode. One of the cool things that the Squarp Hermod Plus can do is song swapping on the fly. I saw it in the Hapax, and it's a really great addition here too for like live set stuff. So with this playing, I'm going to go into Sequence, Project, Save, Load, and I'll pick another project that I want to load. So once I've done this, it's going to say, hey, if you press X right now, you're going to load this next project in at the current BPM. But if you hit Y, you're going to load in the incoming project at its native tempo, which is a little bit faster than this. In this case, I want the incoming project at 120 BPM. One thing to keep in mind is that all the settings that you saved in your project, including what sequence you were on, track mutes, that kind of stuff, they will be the way it's loaded in the next sequence. So prepare accordingly. Let's have a jam. Cool. Let's switch to another project. I'll hit Sequence, push down the encoder, go into Project, Save, Load, and pick the next project I want to load. We're at the same tempo, so it won't ask me if I want to switch the tempos. I'll just say, let's do it. And there we go. Pretty fucking cool. This is the Modbap Osiris. It's a wavetable oscillator, and like many wavetable synths that you hear, it is highly modulatable. It has a lot of timbre changes, and it really, really loves to be modulated. Those are the two controls we're going to be modulating. This is the Acid Rain Maestro. It's one of my favorite CV modulation sources, and we're going to be using it to generate some modulation going to the Modbap Osiris. These two cables right here. Turn them up real quick. Now, one of the cool things we can do with the Hermod Plus is take some channels and turn them into mod channels. I'll hold down track and press X, and now I can change the type of channel that this is. I'm going to change this to a mod track, but same thing with 7 here. There we go. Now we have a couple options. I'm going to take these and put them into the Hermod as opposed to being in the Acid Rain Maestro. Now, if I go to the track here and go to inputs, I can set the A and B input of the Hermod Plus to listen to those Acid Rain Constellation channels, which I've plugged into the Hermod's A and B inputs over there on the left. And now you can hear we are passing through that modulation into the Hermod Plus. Turn it down, you don't hear it. Turn it up, you will hear it. I'm going to go into our track now, and we're going to record this modulation in real time. And it will loop. You're going to hear it kind of freak out a little bit because it's looping, but once I turn that off, it'll just be playing that loop back again. I actually kind of like the sound of it struggling against itself. Let's do it with this other channel here. So we have a CV recorder here, not just a, note sequencer. I can increase the pattern length to whatever I want and record as much of this chain as I want coming out of the Maestro. I could also set up this IntelliGel Triad over here as a CV offset generator, just to send out its own CV, from 0 to 10 volts. And I can record directly into here and just make my own modulation path if I want. Let me clear these things out using the steps here. I can also put these steps down and edit steps as well, which is really, really cool for modulation. You can create your own modulation sequence in here. So now that we have this set up as an offset generator, I'm going to go ahead and hit record and just start recording my own CV path right here. I can switch this to positive and negative and get a greater value here if I want. Really, really powerful and really flexible. Let's do it to channel 6 here too. This is all saved with every single pattern and every single project. You can have CV saved with your projects, which is really, really cool. Another way that we can generate modulation CV in the Hermod Plus is by using effects. So let's hit the effects button. Those are 8 slots. I'm going to come in here and choose LFO. Immediately, we hear a sine wave LFO. Here are all the settings we have for the LFO in here. We can change the rate, we can change the destination, we can change the... Yeah, there we go. We can make it faster. Let's change the shape to a sample on a hold. That sounds really good. Let's do the same thing in channel 7. Yeah. And we can put another LFO after that. So I'm going to turn the sample and hold LFO's output down to about, 40%, 20%? There we go, 20%. And then I can add another LFO after it, like a sine wave or something like that. It's super, super cool. And I don't know, I just think it's really cool that you can just generate LFOs within the Hermod Plus. Yeah. Remember that all this is saved with your projects, so this becomes a very viable live performance device because there's a lot that you can recall with it. I very much like playing live with synthesizers. But what we're going to do instead is use a track's pattern generator. In step mode, I'm going to hold down the encoder and go into the generator, where I have generator and generator settings. Here's all the settings that I can use to generate a pattern algorithmically for this. I'm going to change the density settings for this pattern, and you can also see that we have things like the max note and the min note and length and velocity and a whole bunch of settings. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Now, it doesn't sound great right now because it's not swung with the rest of the stuff. We do have a scale that's already quantizing it to notes. We're using major pentatonic in E. However, yeah, let's transpose it up a little bit. That sounds better. Let's go over here, though, and add the swing effect. That's so much better. So let's do this until we get something that we like. Generate, generate, generate. That's not bad. Let's do it to channel 2. We're going to add swing to this one as well. Now you can have independent swing for each channel, which is actually really, really cool. You can get a very, very humanized feel to your stuff. In fact, the swing function actually has a humanized function, which is pretty rad. Let's go to this one and copy that swing and paste it in there. You can paste effects between channels. Go to 3 and generate another pattern for our qubit surface. Here, though, I'm going to change the quantize to an 8th note. I don't want it to be as busy. Now, that's really nice, but there's too much going on. So I'm going to go into the effects here and add what's called chance, which is a simple sort of, will it, won't it concept. But there's a lot of settings in here that you can customize. All right, so one of the things I wanted to show you was how crazy these dynamic effects can get. Every channel in this pattern is a single note on C, various octaves, but 5 channels just playing 1 bar of the note C. Let's go to effects, and you're going to see that I have all these effects that are currently muted. Let's turn them on one by one for our bass track. You do that by pressing on the grid where an effect is. There it is. Let me turn this decay up. So the first effect is random. Every single time that C note hits, it's going to change to a random note based on parameters that I set. If I click in here, you can see that I have down to -5 semitones, up to 7 semitones, but we can do octaves as well. The next effect is harmony. Now this is just going to sound more random, but what this is doing is adding up to 4 extra notes for every event. You're not going to hear this because this is a monophonic Eurorack voice, but these are going to feed what's coming next, which is our arpeggiator. Now that arp is pulling from the random at the beginning and then those harmonized notes. We are creating a series of theoretical polyphonic events for the arp to pull from. Now, this is unquantized from a musical standpoint, so let's go over to scale and turn this on, and this will adhere all that randomness to the scale that I pick, which is a pentatonic minor in C. Finally, I'm going to add a chance effect. This is going to scoop some of those notes out, so we create this sort of, algorithmic groove out of our arpeggiated thing. This is before, and then this is after. All from one note and a bunch of effects. Let's go to our second track here. Random on, followed by harmony, followed by arp, then chance, then scale. Very similar to what we did with the bass. If I go over to scale here, I think I'm actually going to transpose this up an octave. That sounds better to me. Third track is going to be our qubit surface. Very, very similar, except we're going to start off here with a Euclidean pattern generator. The way that Euclidean patterns work is that you set a certain number of steps, and then you fill it with a certain number of events. So there's our steps, 18, and then we're having 7 events happen within 18, and their rate is an eighth note. So there's 18 eighths in the pattern, and 7 events will happen within that 18. It's just math, baby. There's our random voltage. Let's quantize that so it doesn't sound terrible. And then some chance, because I want it to kind of be a little sparse. Here's the make noise XBO sequence. Let's go ahead and turn on harmony first. It's kind of arbitrary in terms of the order, but sometimes it makes a really big difference. Arp, random, chance, and scale. All right, the last one here would be the siren oscillator. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Random, arp, chance, and scale. So from one note on each channel, we have created this. Let's go ahead and bring the rest of that stuff back in. Now, that's not all I wanted to show you with this. Within the Hermod Plus, for these effects, there is a mod matrix. And it can take incoming CV and or MIDI CCs and affect our effects. So here's our matrix. There's our 4 slots for the mod matrix. I currently have them set to CVA, B, C, and D. And each channel can have a different mapping. The way I currently have this, I have 4 CV channels coming out of the F8R, and these are going to be just creating voltage offsets that will affect the parameters that you see here. The FAR is going to A, B, and C, and D in the Hermod, and the first one is set to the chance amount. So when it's all the way down, no events will happen at all. But when it's all the way up, it'll be at the top range of all of the chance effects for each channel. The second one is the random effects octave amount. If it's all the way up, we're going to get a lot higher octaves. You hear that we're jumping up more octaves when that F8R slider is up. The third one is the rate of the arpeggiator, which almost every channel has, as you saw earlier. By default, it's going to be a 16th note, but as I move it up, there it is. We can go to triplets, eighth notes, quarter notes, and beyond. If you press this row to the right of your assignments, you have offsets and attenuators for every CV input per channel, per slot in the mod matrix. The final one that I have here is actually the key for the entire projects. This uses the scalar effects key parameter. Those are the parameters that we're affecting in the mod matrix, those effects. With a little bit of ingenuity, you can really create some pretty complex algorithmic experiences. And, of course, this thing isn't just for dance music. You can create all kinds of very interesting ambient generative creations with the Hermod Plus. It reminds me a lot of using MIDI effects in Ableton Live. I've got a whole video on making generative music with Ableton Live with MIDI effects. And it's actually really, really similar to how the Hermod Plus works. So if you're used to that workflow, you'll probably wrap your head around this workflow pretty quickly as well. In this quick little demo, I just want to show you how the Hermod Plus can be used for polyphony with CV. So that means that the first 3 tracks coming out of the Hermod right now are set up to send CV and gate to the RYK vector wave, which can do polyphony over CV. So if I go into track and layout, I can go and choose how many voices I want that track to be. So I'm choosing track 1 right now, and I'm going to pick how many notes I want it to be, and also what type of polyphony I want it to be. In this case, poly. And now, if I play, you're going to see it round robining through those, which means essentially it's hocketing, which means it can work as like shifty or a shift register, which is really, really cool. But obviously I can also play this polyphonically, which is also very, very cool. There's another really, really cool thing here is that it works with the effects that we worked with earlier. So here's an ARP that we have. So hey, if you've got a polyphonic Eurorack module, or if you want to experiment with note hopping across your entire system, this is a really fun way to do it. The Hermod Plus, lastly, can also operate as a MIDI sequencer. If we go into track and then hold down the track button and go into MIDI out, we can switch this to MIDI out, the channel number, and pick all the stuff we would need to. I have the piano phonic here from Nobula on 1. And on 2, under channel 10, I have the Squarp rample. It's super easy. So if you have some MIDI modules lying around, or if you have some MIDI synthesizers that you want to use alongside your Eurorack, the Squarp Hermod will do that. It really is a fantastic centerpiece to your system. So with all that said and done, thank you for watching, by the way. Would I recommend the Squarp Hermod Plus? Yeah, obviously. Like, I did this video because I believe in the first one, and I've done, you know, multiple album tracks with the original Hermod. From a songwriting perspective, it is a very, very cool and powerful tool to have directly in your rack. It's very different from things like my other sequencers that I love, like Renee or Moskwa or Bloom or any sort of other, you know, predominantly sort of experimental / algorithmic sequencers. I like the Hermod because it can be both. It can do incredible generative things on one channel, and then it can do incredibly deterministic live playing on the other channel, which lets me be musical in ways that is unique. Like, it's unique to, I think, this device and modular itself. I really hope that you've enjoyed this demo. Leave a comment down below if there's anything you have a question about with the Hermod Plus, and I'll see if I can get to it. But other than that, yeah, that's it. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and do check out the merch drop that's happening right now. All the proceeds are going to go to mermaids to help trans youth and their families. There's a link in the description for that as well. Other than that, I hope you're well. I'll see you in the next video. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording, and I hope you have a wonderful day.